Hello, my name is Alicia Martinez, and this is my Northern New Mexico dialect project that I will be using as my linguistics final. So this presentation will be about the dialect, accents, and languages used in Northern New Mexico. On this first slide, I have included a map to show you where I am from. Because where I live will be referenced as examples to specific Northern New Mexico language and terms used. The little heart is on top of Espanola, where I'm from and currently living, and the black border is where I would consider the dialect continuum to go up to. It could go a little bit further or a little bit inside, because according to George Yule's The Study of Language, Chapter 18, page 284, a dialect continuum is a gradual merging of one regional of language into another. So it could blend a little bit and move around, but for the purpose of the picture, I did make it bold so that it was easier to see. I'm going to be jumping into dialect versus accent. So an easy way that I like to think of it is what you say versus how you say it. So dialect is an aspect of grammar, vocabulary, and pronunciation of a variety of language in contrast to accent. Accent is an aspect of pronunciation that identify where a speaker is from in contrast to dialect. So the main difference is vocabulary versus pronunciation. This definition can also be found on page 218 of the textbook. And some examples of dialect that I've included that are specific to me and my area. The first one is very common at school or in the workplace. Typically when you're among peers, a typical way to greet someone is "Buenos días, ¿cómo estás?" Good morning, how are you? And the typical response is "Muy bien, ¿y tú?" And this could be a very common conversation between two people that don't even speak Spanish completely or at all. It's just a typical way to say good morning and ask how they are. And this term specifically I use a lot. I say adiós, see you mañana, which is goodbye, I will see you tomorrow. So it's a very blended term of English and Spanish. And I would say about 98% of the people I've said this to already know what I'm talking about. I have hardly ever had to clarify myself when using statements like this, as well as more enduring terms like mijo and mija, which means son or daughter. But I've had plenty of adults use this term, and I think it's quite fitting. It's just like, oh, how are you, mija? Or I've missed you, where have you been, kind of thing. Even though you might not be their son or daughter at all. And as for the accent of these dialectual terms, they can vary depending on your emphasis of the accent marks. For example, the sound I and N. So it'd be E and N, like an ñ. For example, the accent over the N in mañana would mean that I emphasize the N. And the I in mijo and mija would make the Y sound. So in New Mexico as a whole, there are plenty of bilingual people, but I would like to clarify that bilingualism doesn't mean you just speak English or Spanish, because that's a very common misconception. It is any two languages. However, to this area specifically, those languages typically consist of English, Spanish, Tewa, Filipino, and sign language. So I think that's kind of an interesting thing, because I am not bilingual. I am fully English speaking, and I know partial Spanish, mainly individual words and short common phrases. but that is still integrated into my language a lot. But there are plenty of people that do the same thing as me, but with Tewa, Filipino, and sign language, as well as being completely fluent in both. So, being that English and Spanish are the primary language in this area, a lot of borrowing happens, a lot of back and forth between the languages, especially in common terms. Here are some that I was able to think of to share as examples with you. So in this column here, we have Spanish, English, and the meaning. So we have vanilla, el lagador, cafeteria, cañón, coyote, and mosquito, all of which can be directly translated to English just by looking at them and the way you pronounce them. So it'd be vanilla, alligator, cafeteria, canyon, coyote, and mosquito. I think the closest ones are probably vanilla and mosquito because they're exactly the same. It is just the way you say them. And here I have also included another definition, a definition term, which is borrowing, the process of taking words from another language. And one of my favorite ways that language is intertwined, it will be on this next slide, donde el camino de inglés y español se encuentran. So that means where the road of English and Spanish meet. And I will literally be talking about roads. So an interesting thing in a lot of local signs is the inclusion of the local language, and it reflects in road signs a lot. So most street names in my area are in Spanish, and a lot of people that do not speak Spanish still read them in Spanish the correct way because of how common they are. So here's a list of examples. It says Calle Sombra, which will translate to Shadow Street, and then Camino Santa Cruz, which would mean Holy Cross Road, and El Llano Road, which translates to the Plain Road. Yet none of these roads are ever translated. That's just the name that everybody uses. And I think it's really interesting because I know other places that are primarily English and they will see Spanish signs, and a lot of people want to translate them and call them those instead. But I don't think I've ever seen that happen here. And my address is very similar to these examples that I have included. It's completely in Spanish, and I have never heard anyone read them in English. So that's just an interesting note I wanted to share. Gracias por su tiempo. Espero que haya disfrutado de mi presentación. Thank you for watching. Thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation.